So what I got for you today is Wolverine and Nick Fury, the Scorpio Connection hardcover. This came out in 1989, so of course it's completely out of print, but you see copies of this here and there. I've got the hardcover. It's 64 pages. It's pretty short, really skinny. This story is reprinted in the Wolverine Omnibus Volume 2, so you can certainly read it there and see what you think, and if you think it's worth pursuing, then you might find an old copy like I've got here. Now, this was originally Marvel graphic novel number 50 in the old Marvel graphic novel series, if you're familiar with that. It was basically magazine-sized, a little wider than the average magazine, I think, and they were soft covers. And if you've ever had one, I have a couple of them still yet, and they were not a joy to read. I mean, they were beautiful. The art was reproduced nice in them. But you had to, like early trades, like almost all early trade paperbacks, you had to fight to hold that sucker down, and it just wanted to close up continuously. You know, it wasn't even a one-handed operation. It certainly wasn't no-handed. It was two hands. That's it. So I hated them that you had to struggle to read them. You know, that was the size of the format was nice, but the execution not so good. Now, for some reason, with this edition, they marketed it as a standalone thing. It doesn't say it's Marvel graphic novel number 50. It just says Wolverine and Nick Fury, the Scorpio Connection. Yeah. So I'm not sure what was going on there, because I don't think they offered all of the original Marvel graphic novel series as hardcovers. I think some of them, they were just put out the way they are, and that was it. So I'm not sure what happened here, but I'll run some B-roll, and you can see how nicely this thing lays open, and the quality of it is really good. It's an old book, but man, it's nice quality. It was easy to read, and it was really easy to scan too, because it lays nice and flat on the platen. I mean, I would still lose some material in the middle there, because you have to hang the cover down the one side. That's how I do it. But yeah, it come out pretty good. You'll see them. I'll be running them if I haven't already started here soon. So take in that gorgeous Howard Chaykin artwork. It's something else. This book was written by Archie Goodwin. See my Manhunter review for more on this legendary icon of comics. Just fantastic creator, but I won't dwell on it here. If you want to hear a little more background on that, on Archie Goodwin, check out that review. I'll put the link down in the doobly-doob. So the art is by Howard Chaykin, and he does the pencils and the inks in here. It is quite spectacular. Howard Chaykin, probably don't need to really go over him too much, but I'll touch on some highlights. He's well known for just a ton of work over the last 50 years or so. The first work I remember seeing of his was on DC's Sword of Sorcery, and it was like the early 70s. And he did a really interesting, and I liked it a lot, adaptation of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I think it ran for 5 or 6 issues, and then that was the end of that. Throughout the 70s, there was a lot of titles that would just crop up like that, and I loved them. And then they would just be canceled after 6 to 10, 12 issues. So that's one thing about the 70s, is comic book wise, there was an experimental era, and they would publish a lot of bizarre stuff, and I like a lot of that weird stuff, you know. I mean, most of the time, the title did not have legs. It would not go on very far, but you could get those issues and read them, and I ate that stuff up. He did the artwork for the original Marvel adaptation of the first Star Wars movie. And I remember when I was a kid, and I had this big giant treasury edition of Star Wars, and I actually read that before I seen the movie. And one of my things I remember about that is I had never seen clips then. It wasn't like now where you had the internet and you can see clips and trailers and all this sort of thing. It was just, you know, you had 3 or 4 channels on the TV, and you had the movies. And a little bit later, we had VHS, but before that, that's pretty much it, you know. And I remember having read that book, the big giant treasury edition, which I had a love-hate relationship, and I still do to this day, because it's nice because it's a huge format, but it's just fragile as all hell. And of course, I could not source any comic bags or boards that would fit such a monstrosity, so mine all ended up pretty messed up. Most people's did, and to find a treasury edition now from way back then that's in good shape is pretty hard because most of them are just trashed because there was no way people could keep them in good condition. You know, they're just too large and too fragile. They have the square binding, but without any thread, it was just glued. You know, those don't work out so well either. But anyway, I remember reading that before I'd seen the movie. But yeah, and so he did that, and that was another early exposure to his art I got. And, you know, actually, his Star Wars adaptation is a little rough compared to everything he did after, because it's another one of those artists that really improved and evolved over the years and just got better and better and better. I mean, he's well known for American Flag, which is a creator-owned thing he did, and that's some pretty spectacular art in there. Now, what some people don't realize probably is that Howard Chaykin was mentored by Gil Kane. Now, before I read that, I could tell right away anyway, because I'm a huge Gil Kane fan. And if you look at Howard Chaykin's, the way he draws feet, especially boots and legs, it looks just like Gil Kane. I mean, exactly, which is not a bad thing, but it's something that someone that can ID comic book art like I can, just from a panel of someone I'm super familiar with, and you don't even have time, we don't even have to have an entire panel. I could just see like a leg, and I go, oh, that's a Gil Kane leg. Well, you could probably fool me with a Howard Chaykin leg, because I'd be like, it's Gil Kane, and you'd be like, nope, that's Howard Chaykin, and that's how you'd get me. Yeah. But anyway, Gil Kane was one of his early mentors, and you can certainly see that in his art. This book has some unusual coloring, too. And coloring is something that, for me, it doesn't usually stick out for me unless it's really bad or if it's really good or unusual. And here it's really good and unusual. There's the color, it's a full color palette, but different pages sometimes are like maybe just a blue or mostly a yellow, and with just a little other colors thrown in. I mean, you see a lot of that kind of stuff done today. I'm reading Paper Girls now, and you can certainly see the artist in that one, the colorist, doing that a lot throughout Paper Girls, especially the first book. And I was actually a little annoyed at first because I thought they did it too much. And I wanted to see actual, full color rendering, not just these sort of 2 or 3 stage color things that you see them do sometimes. And now they're doing it for great effect, obviously. They have the full palette available to them. And they did in 1989, 88 also. Not quite as thousands of colors that we have now, but they had hundreds for sure at that point. But anyway, the color work on this is credited to Richard Ory and Barb Rausch, which I don't think I've ever seen their credits before. But anyway, it is quite good. Sort of psychedelic at times, which fits this because it's dealing with the Scorpio character, and I'll get into him more later, which is kind of a psychedelic, trippy kind of villain. And flashbacks in this are handled nicely. When you'll see Nick Fury, I think I've got a scan of it. Maybe I'll run it here. But Nick Fury is relating some of the background information. He's flashing back to earlier in his life in conversation. And that whole sequence is done in this black and white. And it has this classy old movie feel to it. It's really well done. It's very enjoyable. Good work all the way around here, from the writing to the art to the color work. Nice. Another thing I should note about the visuals on this book is the titling. And normally that's not something I ever comment on, but it's really cool. It's fun seeing the Nick Fury name done up in the Wolverine font. And that kind of dawned on me too as I was doing these scans. I was like, that's the Wolverine title font, but Nick Fury's name. And man, it looks really good. I'm kind of someone who notices fonts. I'm one of those kind of nerds, and man, I really like seeing that the way they did it here. Very nice. So the story does deal with Nick Fury having a really reluctant and uneasy team up with Wolverine. And it's all because of this old villain, Scorpio, seems to reappear after years and years they thought he was dead. And I'm not going to give away anything here, and I probably won't talk about the plot much more because the reveals here are really integral to the story and you enjoying it, and it's kind of a wow factor when you find when all is revealed. So I won't get into that. But you do get to see Arcade appear, and Arcade's one of my favorite villains. He's this, in some ways, Arcade is kind of like the Joker for Marvel. If that tells you anything about it, this psycho gamesman guy that's always, You know, he was a great X-Men villain. He would run them through all kinds of game simulation type traps and death rooms and whatnot. It's good stuff. It's nice seeing him pop up here. But yeah, it's a globe-trotting kind of James Bond style espionage adventure, you know, but with Wolverine and Nick Fury. So it's good stuff. A lot of action, overflowing panels, really dynamic layouts throughout, you know, which is something you expect from Howard Chaykin, and he delivers here. He really does. Now, the Scorpio character was created by Jim Steranko. And right there at the beginning of the book, you see it when I'm thumbing through, and I think I got a scan of it too. They acknowledged that right at the beginning of the book. Well, that was pretty cool. And that also explains some of the psychedelic coloring and whatnot. Even though this is not set in the 60s, you know, the original Steranko Nick Fury stuff was in the last part of the 60s. And so, yeah, it's a nice package, and it all makes sense in the end. And, yeah, it's really good. I can't really speak too highly of it. I liked it a lot. And if you can find, even if you have the omnibuses like I do, and you want to double dip just because it's so good, yeah, pick this up if you find it somewhere. I mean, it is completely out of print, but sometimes you run across it. I think I got this copy. I really can't remember. In my database, I have it listed as gift. And usually when I have it that way, it means a lot of the material, a lot of the books was stuff that obviously somebody gave me as a gift. But this thing is so old, I'm thinking it must have been part of an auction box. You know, it's just a random box of stuff that had some books in it that my father-in-law probably picked up at an auction. And I'm thinking that may have been where this came from. And my copy's not in perfect shape. The boards are a little warped. And in fact, that relates to the story I want to tell here. Anyway, I had actually, the reason I on the thumbnail for this, I put Forgotten Treasure, because I kind of consider this a forgotten treasure. And what I mean by that is, Kristen had actually got this book autographed for me. You know, I don't travel much, and so I don't get to very many conventions, but Kristen does, and she loves to do that. And so when I know she's going to go somewhere, I look up who all's there, and invariably I find a bunch of artists that I want autographs from, and you know, and she tries to get them for me. She does a really good job. She did get this autograph by Howard Chaykin, and I had forgotten that happened. It'd been a number of years ago. And so when these omnibuses come out collecting the Wolverine material, I think, oh, I don't need that skinny old, slightly warped hardcover anymore because it's included here. And I set this book aside to put on eBay, forgetting about the autograph, you know. And the other day I picked it up. I was trying to organize some stuff here in the library and put some stuff away that I'd let just stack up, you know, and that was in the stack. Opened it up, and right there, Howard Chaykin's autograph. And I'm like, shit, I was going to get rid of this. I will never get rid of this, okay? This doesn't go away until I die. This is part of the library now. Anyway, so I did ask her. I talked to Kristen on the phone about it, and I was like, do you remember getting Howard Chaykin's autograph from me? And she goes, oh, yeah. And I said, do you remember what it was? I'm just kind of quizzing her before. And she's like, yeah. And I said, do you remember being a skinny hardcover? And she goes, yes, right. It was a Wolverine hardcover. And I'm like, man, I had forgot completely about that. And so I asked her what her impressions of him was, and she was like, well, he was just an old man, you know. All the creators I sent her to her are old men, because they're older than me even, you know. And yeah, but she said he was nice. He was super nice, and she started to get her purse out to pay him, because it seems like most artists nowadays, they want money for their autographs. You know, it's not free. I mean, Neil Adams, I got his autograph once, and he wanted $20 a book. That's it, $20 a book. And that was years ago. But anyway, so Howard Chaykin, she started to get her money out, and she was about to ask him how much, and he was like, no, I don't do that. So, yeah, pretty good guy. I mean, he acted, I don't think she said he was offended, but he was very adamant. No, I don't take money for that. No. Yeah. She said some other things about it that was pretty interesting, and I think she came away with a pretty good impression of him, you know, as a decent person. You know, check her in one of the live shows and ask her about it if you want to know more, because yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, I'll never get rid of this for that reason. Well, not just for that reason, but certainly part of the reason. Yeah, it's autographed by Howard Chaykin. Love it. So, yeah, Howard Chaykin did actually write a sequel to this in 1994, and it was called Wolverine and Nick Fury Scorpio Rising. Now, it was done in the prestige format, they used to call it, which was basically a very skinny, soft-cover trade paperback is kind of what Prestige was. It was sort of the successor to the old Marvel giant-size square-bound editions, which most of the Marvel giant-size books from the 70s and 80s, they'd be king-size special, giant-size. Some of the annuals were done that thick. They were generally like 64 pages, square-bound, and a horror show to try to keep in good condition, because that square binding, so it was stapled flat and then glued, lots of glue on the end, but it was square. So these were comic books, if you haven't seen one. If you have, then you know what I'm talking about if you own any. But you opened it up and you had to read it like a trade, because it didn't want to open either, because they had mashed the end square. So basically all the advantages of a single issue regular comic book stapled were thrown out the window with the square bound books, because they would no longer just lie open for you to read, And you had gutter loss too, because it would really suck into that square. And those comics were very hard to keep in good condition. It's hard to find one now that's perfect, because usually that end wanted to unwrap and come off. But anyway, the Prestige edition that they did in the early 90s, some in the late 80s, I think even, was kind of a more modern version of that, which still sucked, But anyway, that's how that book came out. It was not an adaptation of anything else. It was a standalone thing. And I do not think that is covered in the Wolverine Omnibus Volume 2. Hopefully, it will be included in Wolverine Omnibus Volume 3. It should be. I think, time-wise, it should line up for that. So, this is a 9 for me, for sure. It's really good. I think it could be a little longer, of course. That's usually a criticism with some of the older stuff. Wish we had more, But yeah, I give it 9 stars. Really like it. And it's certainly a forgotten treasure for me. Well, not forgotten anymore, but it was for a bit. But anyway, next Monday, I'll be back with the art of Sean Phillips. So come check that out. Fantastic stuff there. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, please do. Please hit the subscribe button down there. You know how that works. And if you don't want to miss anything at all, make sure you hit the bell notification deal. And if you really want to support the channel, if you really love my stuff, I do have a Patreon now. And I don't have minimum levels or anything like that. So, whatever you want to do, if you want to do it, it's down in the didgeridoo also. Didgeridoo, doobly-doo, down there. See ya.